Section 3. Norway eased in ahead of the others, with the hubbed, unsightly Taurus of Pell, a gleaming sprawl in her vidscreens. The riders were fanned out, fending off the freighters for the moment. The merchanter crews in command of those refugee ships wisely held the line, giving her no trouble. The pale crescent of Pell's world. Down below, in Pell's matter-of-fact nomenclature, hung beyond the station, swirled with storms. They matched up with Pell's station signal, drawing even with the flashing lights on the area designated for their docking. The cone which would receive their nose probe glowed blue with the come-aheads. Section orange, the distorted letters red on vid, beside a tangle of solar vanes and panels. Signy punched in scan, saw things from where they ought to be on Pell's borrowed image. Constant chatter flowed from Pell Central in the ship channels, keeping a dozen techs busy at calm. They entered final approach, lost G gently as Norway's rotating inner cylinder slung gutwise in its frame, slowed and locked to docking position. All personnel decks on the stations up and down. They felt other stresses magnified for a time, a series of reorientations. The cone loomed. Easy dock. And they met the grapple, a dragging confirmation of the last slam of G. Opened access for Pell dock crews, stable now, and solidly part of Pell's rotation. "I'm getting an all quiet on dockside," Graf said. "The station master's police are all over the place." "Message," Com said. "Pell station master to Norway, requesting military cooperation with desks set up to facilitate processing as per your instructions. All procedures are as you requested, with the station master's compliments, Captain." Reply. Hansford coming in immediately with crisis in life support and possible riot conditions. Stay back of our lines. End it. Graf, take over operations. D, give me those troops out on dock double time. She left matters there, rose and strode back through the narrow, bowed aisles on the bridge to the small compartment which served as her office and oftentimes sleeping quarters. She opened the locker there and slipped on a jacket, slipped a pistol into her pocket. It was not a uniform. No one in the fleet, perhaps, possessed a full regulation uniform. Supply had been that bad that long. Her captain's circle on her collar was her only distinction from a merchanter. The troops were no better uniformed, but armored. That they kept in condition at all costs. She hastened down via the lift into the lower corridor, proceeding amid the rush of troops Dijans had ordered to the dock, combat-rigged, through the access tube, and out into the chill, wide spaces. The whole dock was theirs. Vast, upward-curving perspective. Section arches curtained by ceiling at the station rim curve swept leftward toward gradual horizon. On the right, a section seal was in use, stopping the eye there. The place was vacant of all but the dock crews and their gantries, and station security and their processing desks, and those were well back of Norway's area. There were no native workers, not here, not in this situation. Debris lay scattered across the wide dock. Papers, bits of clothing, evidencing a hasty withdrawal. The dockside shops and offices were empty. The niner corridor midway of the dock showed likewise vacant and littered. Dijans's deep bellow echoed in the metal girders overhead as he ordered troops deployed about the area where Hansford was coming in. Pell dockers moved up. Signy watched and gnawed her lip nervously. Glanced aside as a civ came up to her, youngish, darkly aquiline, bearing a tablet and looking like business in his neat blue suit. The plug she had in one ear kept advising her of Hansford's status, a constant clamor of bad news. "What are you?" she asked. "Damon Constantine, Captain, from Legal Affairs." She spared a second look. A Constantine. He could be that. Angelo had 2 boys before his wife's accident. "Legal affairs," she said with distaste. "I'm here if you need anything, or if they do. I've got a comm link with Central. There was a crash. Hansford made a bad dock, grated down the guidance cone, and shuddered into place. "Get her hooked up and get out!" Dee roared at the dock crews. No calm for him. Graf was ordering matters from Norway's command. Hansford's crew would stay sealed on their bridge, working debarkation by remote. "Tell them walk out," she heard relayed from Graf. "Any rush at troops will be met with fire." The hookups were complete. The ramp went into place. "Move!" Dee bellowed. Dockers pelted behind the lines of troops. Rifles were leveled. The hatch opened. A crash up the access tube. A stench rolled out onto the chill of the dock. Inner hatches opened, and a living wave surged out, trampling each other, falling. They screamed and shouted and rushed out like madmen, staggered as a burst of fire went over their heads. "Hold it!" Dee shouted. "Sit down where you are and put your hands on your heads!" Some were sitting down already, out of weakness. Others sank down and complied. A few seemed too dazed to understand, but came no further. The wave had stopped. At Signy's elbow, Damon Constantine breathed a curse and shook his head. No word of loss from him. Sweat stood visibly on his skin. His station stared a riot in the face. Collapse of systems. Hansford's death 10,000-fold. There were 100, maybe 150 living, crouched on the dock by the umbilical gantry. The ship's stench spread. A pump labored, flushing air through Hansford's systems under pressure. There were 1,000 on that ship. "We're going to have to go in there," Signy muttered, sick at the prospect. Dee was moving the others one at a time, passing them under guns into a curtained area where they were to be stripped, searched, scrubbed, passed on to the desks or to the medics. Baggage there was none, not with this group, nor papers worth anything. "Need a security team suited up for a contamination area," she told young Constantine. "And stretchers. Get us a disposal area prepared. We're going to vent the dead. It's all we can do. Have them ID'd as best you can. Fingerprints, photos, whatever. Every corpse passed out of here unidentified is future trouble for your security." Constantine looked ill. That was well enough. So did some of her troops. She tried to ignore her own stomach. A few more survivors had made their way to the opening of the access. Very weak, almost unable to get down the ramp. A handful. A scant handful. Lila was coming in. Her approach begun in her crew's panic, defying instructions and Ryder's threats. She heard Graf's voice reporting it, activated her own mic. "Stall them off. Clip a vein off them if you have to. We've got our hands full. Get me a suit out here." They found 78 more living, lying among the decomposing dead. The rest was cleanup, and no more threat. Signy passed decontamination, stripped off her suit, sat down on the bare dock, and fought a heaving stomach. A Civ aid worker chose a bad time to offer her a sandwich. She pushed it away, took the local herbal coffee, and caught her breath in the last of the processing of Hansford's living. The place stank now of antiseptic fogging. A carpet of bodies in the corridors. Blood. Dead. Hansford's emergency seals had gone into place during a fire. Some of the dead had been cut in two. Some of the living had broken bones from being trampled in the panic. Urine. Vomit. Blood. Decay. They had had closed systems, had not had to breathe it. The Hansford survivors had had nothing at the last but the emergency oxygen. That had possibly been a cause of murder. Most of the living had been sealed into areas where the air had held out less foul than the badly ventilated storage holds, where most of the refugees had been crammed. "Message from the station master," Com said into her ear, "requesting the captain's presence in station offices at the earliest." "No," she sent back shortly. They were bringing Hansford's dead out. There was some manner of religious service, assembly line fashion, some amity for the dead before venting them. Caught in Downbelow's gravity well, they would drift in that direction eventually. She wondered vaguely whether bodies burned in falling. Likely, she thought. She had not much to do with worlds. She was not sure whether anyone had ever cared to find out. Lila's folks were exiting in better order. They pushed and shoved at the first, but they stopped it when they saw the armed troops facing them. Constantine intervened with useful service over the portable loudspeaker, talking to the terrified civs in stationers' terms and throwing stationers' logic in their faces, the threat of damage to fragile balances, the kind of drill and horror story they must have heard all their confined lives. Signy put herself on her feet again during the performance, still holding the coffee cup. Watched with a calmer stomach as the procedures she had outlined began to function smoothly, those with papers to one area and those without to another, for photographing an ID by statement. The handsome lad from Legal Affairs proved to have some other uses, a voice of ringing authority when it regarded disputed paper or confused station staff. "Griffin's moving up on docking," Graf's voice advised her. "Station advises us they're wanting back 500 units of confiscated housing based on Hansford's casualties." "Negative," she said flatly. "My respects to Station Command, but out of the question. What's the status on Griffin?" "Panicky. We've warned them." "How many others are coming apart?" "It's tense everywhere. Don't trust it. They could bolt, any one of them. Maureen was one dead, coronary, another ill. I'm routing her in next. Station Master asks whether you'll be available for conference in an hour. I pick up that the company boys are making demands to get into this area. Keep stalling." She finished the coffee, walked along the lines in front of Griffin's dock, the whole operation moving down a berth, for there was nothing left at Hansford's berth worth guarding. There was quiet from the processed refugees. They had the matter of locating their lodgings to occupy them, and the station's secure environment to comfort them. A suited crew stood by to move Hansford out. They had only 4 berths at this dock. Signy measured with her eyes the space the station had allotted them, 5 levels of 2 sections and the 2 docks. Crowded, but they would manage for a while. Barracks could solve some of it. Temporarily. Things would get tighter. No luxuries, that was certain. They were not the only refugees adrift. They were simply the first. And upon that knowledge, she kept her mouth shut. It was Dina that broke the peace. A man caught with weapons in scan, a friend who turned ugly on his arrest. 2 dead, then, and sobbing, hysterical passengers afterward. Signy watched it, simply tired, shook her head, and ordered the bodies vented with the rest, while Constantine approached her with angry arguments. "Martial law," she said, ending all discussion, and walked away. Sita, Pearl, Little Bear, Winifred. They came in with agonizing slowness, unloaded refugees and property, and the processing inches its way along. Signy left the dock then, went back aboard Norway and took a bath. She scrubbed 3 times all over before she began to feel that the smell and the sights had left her. Station had entered altar day. Complaints and demands had fallen silent at least for a few hours. Or if there were any, Norway's altar day command fended them off for her. There was comfort for the night. Company of sorts, a leave-taking. He was another item of salvage from Russell's and Mariner, not for transport on the other ships. They would have torn him apart. He knew this and appreciated matters. He had no taste for the crew either, and understood his situation. "You're getting off here," she told him, staring at him, who lay beside her. The name did not matter. It confused itself in her memory with others, and sometimes she called him by the wrong one, late, when she was half asleep. He showed no emotion at that statement, only blinked, indication that he had absorbed the fact. The face intrigued her. Innocence, perhaps. Contrasts intrigued her. Beauty did. "You're lucky," she said. He reacted to that the same way, as he reacted to most things. He simply stared, vacant and beautiful. They had played with his mind on Russell's. There was a sordidness in her sometimes, a need to deal wounds, limited murder to blot out the greater ones, to deal little terrors, to forget the horror outside. She had sometime nights with Graf, with Dee, with whoever took her fancy. She never showed this face to those she valued, to friends, to crew. Only sometimes there were voyages like this one, when her mood was black. It was a common disease in the fleet, in the sealed worlds of ships without discharge, among those in absolute power. "Do you care?" she asked. He did not, and that was, perhaps, his survival. Norway remained, her troops visibly on duty on the dockside, the last ship berthed in quarantine. On the dock, the lights were still at bright noon, over lines which moved only slowly, under the presence of the guns.